Hi guys, welcome to ToK Today. If you want further help or resources with your ToK Exhibition or your ToK essay, then please go to toktoday.com. We've got lots of resources there to help you and lots of videos on this channel. Please remember to hit like and subscribe if you find these resources helpful or useful. Okay, without further ado, let's get on to today's ToK Exhibition prompt. Should some knowledge not be sought on ethical grounds? So first of all, let's start with an interpretation of this exhibition prompt. I interpret this prompt as asking whether there is some knowledge that we should not acquire or produce for ethical reasons. Now, you may interpret it in a different way. That's fine. Just be sure to explain to the examiner at the beginning of your exhibition commentary how you're interpreting it. I've seen some students who've interpreted this prompt as asking whether we have to use ethical means to acquire knowledge. That's not how I interpret it, but as Foucault said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Okay, let's work out 3 knowledge arguments to answer this prompt, and I strongly recommend that students identify 3 knowledge arguments before you identify objects for the prompt. It makes the rest of the exhibition easier. And it makes it more likely that you will gain high marks. So, here we go. These are my knowledge arguments. Knowledge argument 1, some knowledge should not be sought because seeking it will require unethical behaviours. Knowledge argument 2, some knowledge should not be sought because there is a high probability that it will be used in unethical ways. And knowledge argument 3, all knowledge, including ethical standards, is contextual, and therefore there is no knowledge that should not be sought on ethical grounds. These are just examples of knowledge questions that could be used for this IA prompt. There are many other knowledge questions that you could develop for this prompt. Now we have our knowledge questions, let's develop each of them as an answer to the prompt. And to do this, we'll be using the ToK Today structure that ensures that you cover all aspects of the marking rubric, increasing your chances of getting a high score in the exhibition. Let me just say at this point that this commentary and all the notes and the diagrams and all of this can be found on the toktoday.com website. So go over there and you can get all of this content for free there. Okay, so first of all, we've got this diagram here which shows how I develop the commentary for each individual object. So we run through, from the prompt, we come up with a knowledge claim or a knowledge argument. You've just seen that I've done that. From that, we link an object, and from that, we then develop the top concepts. We explain the link to the real-world context, explain the link to knowledge, justify the use of the object, and include some evidence. Evidence is usually just citing some sort of academic study or some details relating to the object. This diagram shows what the whole commentary will look like overall when you've done that for all 3 arguments or objects, depending on which you think is more important. I tend to think the argument is more important than the object. But hey. Okay, so knowledge argument 1 was that some knowledge should not be sought because seeking it will require unethical behaviours. So my object for this is a photograph of Tuskegee University in Alabama, United States. If anyone is from Alabama, United States or knows its university, I apologise for my probable mispronunciation of that university. Tuskegee? I don't know. Okay, so what's the link between the real-world context of the object and the prompt? Well, between 1932 to 1972, Tuskegee University in the US Department of Public Health infected 399 African-American men with syphilis in order to study the progression of syphilis in men. The study is now deemed unethical as the men were not given proper treatment for their disease. Further, the researchers did not obtain informed consent for the participants, and the study potentially perpetuated harmful stereotypes about African Americans. And I've got that content from a book which I have cited in the commentary, which is available from toktoday.com. Let's look at the link between the object and the knowledge argument. Well, the aim of the Tuskegee syphilis study was to understand the natural progression of the disease in African American men, and this would be deemed justifiable by many health professionals. However, this knowledge could have been sought using ethical means, such as studying men who have contracted syphilis naturally. The debate is whether the quality of knowledge produced by unethical means, such as in this study, was significantly better than that which would have been produced using ethical means. If the knowledge produced unethically was significantly better than that produced ethically, then the unethical costs of seeking such knowledge could be justified. Important ToK concept. In some instances, knowledge produced unethically could lead to greater ethical benefits than the costs of the unethical practices required to produce them. In the case of the Tuskegee syphilis study, the knowledge gained is deemed by many researchers to not be significantly better than that which could have been gained using ethical methods. And I've got that argument from a study done by Pritchard and Goldfarb, which I've referenced in the bibliography. How we determine better knowledge varies depending on the context, including the purpose of the knowledge, the intentions of the researcher, and the methodological constraints. The context of the Tuskegee study did not require unethical practices to produce knowledge that was significantly better than that which could have been sought ethically. As such, this object demonstrates that some knowledge should not be sought on ethical grounds due to unethical practices of seeking that knowledge. And finally, we have to come up with a specific justification for the inclusion of Tuskegee University in the exhibition, and I said that the Tuskegee study is included specifically because it demonstrates that often knowledge can be sought using ethical means rather than unethical means, even if the ethical means are lengthier or more costly. And the number of words that I've used for Object 1 is 321. Now, Object 2 is a eugenics poster from the Wonders of Life exhibition in Berlin in 1935. First of all, we explain the link between the real-world context and the prompt. And Object 2 is a poster shown at an exhibition in Berlin in 1935. The poster promotes human eugenics, that is, the selective breeding to increase the frequency of desirable characteristics. The poster shows demographic projections of the higher fertility of the inferior people compared with superior people. The poster shows that some knowledge should not be sought on ethical grounds if that knowledge will be used for unethical purposes. As such, Object 2 refers to ethical grounds as the ethical principles regarding the use of knowledge. Now we have to explain the link between the object and the knowledge argument. And in this, I've said that much research into genetics has occurred since the Nazis were undertaking eugenics research in the 1940s. Contemporary genetics research is governed by strong ethical frameworks, including ethical codes of practice, disclosure, and application, including the use of ethical boards and overseeing bodies. As such, contemporary genetics research is widely deemed to be unethical. It gives us an understanding of the link between genetics and various diseases, and it's used to improve human health and prolong life. However, the Nazis used the subsection of genetics research known as eugenics in order to develop a superior racial grouping. Their research methods involved many unethical practices, including enforced sterilization, murder of people with specific conditions, and enforced surgery. So how do you justify including it in the exhibition? Well, Object 2 is included in the exhibition because it demonstrates that not only should some knowledge not be sought because of the methodology of seeking that knowledge, that's Object 1, but also because of the application of the knowledge when it's produced. Contemporary genetics research, in contrast to eugenics research, has parallels in terms of the knowledge sought, but both the methodology of seeking the knowledge and the use of the knowledge produced is radically different from eugenics research. And I've got that from an article by Kaplan et al., which I have referenced in the bibliography. That's the evidence. And Object 2, I have used 365 words. Let's move on to Object 3. Object 3 is the book Fingerprints, which was written by Francis Galton in 1892. So first of all, we have to explain the link between the real-world context of this object and the prompt. Now, I've said that Object 3 is the book Fingerprints by Francis Galton, 1892. Galton undertook the first scientific study of fingerprints as a means of identification and was the first scientist to codify the use of fingerprints for identification. And this object is linked to the prompt because Galton's work on fingerprints would be deemed unethical by today's standards, and yet the knowledge is now applied for ethical purposes. As such, this object demonstrates that all knowledge, including ethics, is contextual and therefore open to change, and therefore no knowledge should not be sought on ethical grounds. Now I have to explain the link between the object and the knowledge argument. In the 1890s, Galton was undertaking a form of eugenics research in which he was interested in the relationship between genetics and phenotypical characteristics. He undertook mass cross-cultural research. The aims, some of the practices, and the knowledge produced from this research would have been deemed unethical today. However, at the time, the work was viewed as respectable and sophisticated scientific research. And this shows that ethical codes and practices change in time and space. As such, we could argue that we should seek knowledge regardless of current ethical beliefs, as those ethical beliefs may change in the future. And I've got that argument from a research paper which was written by, I suspect, Galton's great-grandchildren or grandchildren. You can check out the reference in the bibliography. However, Galton's work gives us further support for this argument because in the course of his research, he codified the use of fingerprints as a means of identification, and this knowledge is used in such a way today that would be deemed ethical in preventing wrongdoing by police and people like that, catching criminals. Now we have to justify the inclusion of that object in the exhibition. And I've said that Object 3 is included because it was the first time that fingerprints were scientifically studied to produce the knowledge for reliable identification by fingerprint. Reliability, ToK concept. Arguably, because of Galton's context and the lack of prior research in this area, the study necessarily broke contemporary ethical guidelines. Controversial. However, not only was the research not deemed unethical in the late 19th century, but the knowledge produced from Galton's research is used for ethical purposes today. As such, this object supports the proposition that all knowledge should be sought regardless of the ethical grounds. And for Object 3, I have used 329 words. So that gives me 1,015 words for that first draft of my ToK exhibition. I've got a bit of editing to do. I've got to get rid of 60 words, but I'm getting close to that 950. And you can find that commentary over at toktoday.com. So just in summary there, what I'm trying to say, I guess, with this is once you've worked out your interpretation of the IA prompt, then work out 3 knowledge arguments to unpack that prompt. And from those 3 knowledge arguments, then you can identify the object. You get the marks in the exhibition for the ToK content, for the knowledge, not for knowing lots about the object. So it's the knowledge which is important, which is why I sort of say, do the knowledge arguments first. Now, there's a big myth around that the objects have to in some way be personal to you. They don't. What the objects have to be is specific. They have to be specific objects. So it's no use just saying, this is a Bible. It has to be the Bible that my grandmother gave me on my baptism or something like that, or the first Bible ever printed in Russian or something like that. Yeah, it has to be a specific object, not just any old generic type of object. And more importantly than that, it has to be specific to the knowledge argument that you're making. And that's the key. It has to be specific to the knowledge argument that you're making. Okay, I think I've talked for long enough, and if you're still here, then you're a ToK hero. Please hit like and subscribe if you found this content useful or you're just feeling nice. Have a great day. If you need help with your ToK essay or exhibition, then get in touch or go over to toktoday.com. I hope to see you on the next video. Stay ToKtastic. Have a great day. Bye.